to read the book?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. This book's called What If Louis XVI Had Not Called Upon the Estates General? It's about history because I know you love that. Okay. Once upon a time, there was a king, some called, well, incompetent. He was a pushover to his wife, and if that wasn't bad enough, he carried that same attitude over to politics. Perhaps, if he had been a better king, he could have saved the country from its financial crisis, but the fact remained that he just wasn't. For the past couple of centuries, debt had been a characteristic of his country's government, what with all the frivolous nobles and the long wars waged across the seas. Even so, it was only by this time that the situation had grown so out of control. To end his problems, the king chose to call upon the ancient parliament, composed of 3 estates: clergymen, nobles, and lastly commoners. The problem was the parliament demanded the same of the king. Not liking the way the meeting was going, the commoners formed their own body, vowing to write a constitution, an act of defiance to start a revolution. That rhymed. Revolution blazed across the land. Much blood was shed. Eventually the king was killed too. A new government, one of the people, was formed instead. But what if the king hadn't summoned the parliament? Revolution had been brewing for a long time. There was no avoiding it, but it could have happened differently. For one thing, it may have just been a peasant rebellion, soon crushed. But likely, it wouldn't be so easily crushed. Many a peasant rebellion have managed to negotiate with the king. The rebellion would start among the peasants and the urban working classes, unhappy with their taxes. With all of their taxes and tithes, the peasants had well over half their income drained by superiors. Then, maybe some bourgeoisie would join, unhappy with their lower status despite being nearly as wealthy and numerous as the nobles. Making their way to the king, the party would be ready to confront him. But if all kings share one thing, that is pride. The king wouldn't back down so easily, but he would have to get out of the situation. The king would most likely try to impose taxes upon the nobles and clergy, since he had been considering it anyways. How long he would keep his promise is in question. In history, many a kingly promise has been broken. But with most of the populace at his heels, the king would have to be very careful. Another outcome, had said peasant rebellion been a bit stronger, it may have been able to institute a constitutional monarchy. If it were a constitutional monarchy, the royal family would have lived even to today. Many other royal families still do. While they may have no political power, they could share similar celebrity status to those of their neighbors across the sea. After all, their country is so famed for fashion and style. Certain people may not have risen up, like this man here. Circumstances allowed him to rise and become general at a very young age, and for him to be able to eventually declare himself emperor. If he had not risen, his code of laws emphasizing equality would not have been written nor spread across the continent by his empire building. However, such ideas had long been in the air, and sooner or later they would have been written by someone else. But would that person have forcefully spread them by building an empire? That's unlikely, so it wouldn't have quite the same effect. While this man is considered a conqueror, many consider that he helped blend cultures in his empire. On an island across the world, another revolution occurred, overthrowing slavery and colonial rule. Many say it was initiated by our revolution. However, there was already much tension, and it would have happened anyways. All it needed was a strong leader who was born and raised to be that way. But would they have been able to overthrow the system completely if they hadn't known that it was possible to do so? They may have set their goals too low and largely failed. The country has since grown and is flourishing. With all the events that happened in between, it is difficult to measure how the revolution happened. Some say a sense of citizenship and military trust is imprinted into the citizens' minds. Even so, many events beforehand echo into modern culture. Later events echo even more. Their emphasis on style came from royalty
very,
and nobles
very
before the
complex.
revolution. Later. Okay, that's it. What do you want to do now?
I don't know.
While I chose my subject completely on a whim, I ended up learning a lot. One of the messages that I learned, and I'd like the class to take away from this, is that in history, there really isn't such a thing as being spontaneous. Everything has been built up to for quite a long time by many events, but at the same time, if anything went wrong or had gone differently, the event would have happened differently, and that would have made all the difference. And then it could have a domino effect.